Hello, everyone, and good evening again, and welcome to our Tuesday evening lessons. This week, actually, we're going to carry on with Bala Islam's Freedom article, where we left off under the subheading, "The general shape of the progenitor is never lost." I presume you guys sent the link to everyone, and it's on YouTube as well. Okay, great. So let's see what Bala Islam has to say. We're continuing this article. I think this is the fourth week or the third? The third. Okay, so this is the third lesson we're having on this article. It's a long article, but it's a fundamental article where initially he described to us what our nature is built out of. So now that we've had this whole review of our nature, how we're built from just like a seed of wheat, he describes us in the article, and how our nature is in that seed and how it develops with the environment and with the characteristics, personality, and how the environment molds that person into a certain form. He explained to us all the processes that we go through actually in life with the example of a seed. And now we're going to carry on with the subtitle, "The general shape of the progenitor is never lost." So it is that each source that had taken off the preliminary shape of the progenitor and had taken on a new shape as a result of the three factors that were added to it and would change it significantly, the general shape of the progenitor still remains and will never assume the shape of another person who resembles him, just as oat will never resemble wheat. This is so because each and every source is in itself a long sequence of generations, comprised of several hundred generations, and the source includes the conceptions of them all. However, they are not revealed in it in the same way they appeared in the ancestors, that is, in the form of ideas, but only as abstract forms. Therefore, they exist in him in the form of abstract forces called tendencies and instincts, without him knowing their reason or why he does what he does. Thus, there can never be two people with the same attribute. So this is an important concept because inside of us, there's all kinds of characteristics, and inside everyone, actually. So sometimes we complain about what people do, how they behave, and so on. And if you think about it, a lot of people probably complain about how we behave and how we do things and so on. And he's just saying, listen, these characteristics that appear inside of us are coming from our progenitors. And it's years and years of, ancestral heritage. And throughout all our ancestors, these forms, ideas, and concepts, they're all inside of us. And they all exist inside of us as tendencies. So, instincts, how we behave, how we act, how we react to things. So all these are within, and it's developing from within us. And it's already embedded in us. So it's like a software, really. And what can the hardware do except run the software and work according to the software? So the body is like a hardware, and all the tendencies coming from the progenitors, our ancestral heritage from, thousands of years, it's an accumulation. And all these things are inside of us as tendencies like a software. And so we work like hardware and software. And because all of us have this different combination of ancestral heritage, all of us are different, just like our faces are different. Our thoughts, desires, tendencies, instincts, they're all working in a different way. So on the one hand, everybody is an individual and everybody is special, unique, let's call it. And on the other hand, it just shows that these are all inside of us and there's really not much we can do about it. It's just embedded in us. So let's read a little bit more, and then we'll see if you have any questions later down the line. The necessity of preserving the freedom of the individual. So now that we understood that all our individuality comes from all those generations, Islam wants to say, well, everybody's unique, and let's see why it's really important for us to preserve everyone's individuality and its freedom. Know that this is the one true possession of the individual that must not be harmed or altered. This is because the end of all these tendencies, which are included in the source, is to materialize and assume the form of concepts when that individual grows and obtains a mind of his own. As a result of the law of evolution, which controls that chain and prompts it ever forward, as explained in the article, The Peace. Also, we learn that each and every is very important, and we should be utilizing all of them in one way or another. Thus, anyone who eradicates a tendency from an individual and uproots it causes the loss of that sublime and wondrous concept from the world, intended to emerge at the end of the chain. For that tendency will never again emerge in any other body. Accordingly, we must understand that when a particular tendency takes the form of a concept, it can no longer be distinguished as good or bad. This is because such distinctions are recognized only when they are still tendencies or immature concepts, and in no way are any of them recognized when they assume the shape of true concepts. So from the above, we learn that a terrible wrong inflict those nations that force their reign on minorities, depriving them of freedom without allowing them to live their lives by the tendencies they have inherited from their ancestors. They are regarded as no less than murderers. And even those who do not believe in religion or in purposeful guidance can understand the necessity to preserve the freedom of the individual by watching nature's systems. For we can see how all the nations that ever fell throughout the generations came to it only due to their oppression of minorities and individuals, which had therefore rebelled against them and ruined them. Hence, it is clear to all that peace cannot exist in the world if we do not take into consideration the freedom of the individual. Without it, peace will not be sustainable and ruin shall prevail. Thus, we have clearly defined the essence of the individual with utmost accuracy, after the deduction of all that he takes from the public. But now we face a question: where, in the end, is the individual himself? All we have said thus far concerning the individual is perceived as only the property of the individual, inherited from his ancestors. But where is the individual himself, and the heir and the carrier of that property, who demands that we guard his property? From all that has been said thus far, we have yet to find the point of self in man, which stands before us as an independent unit. And why do I need the first factor, which is a long chain of thousands of people, one after the other, from generation to generation, with which we set the image of the individual as an heir? And what do I need the other three factors, and what do I need the other three factors, which are the thousands of people standing one besides the other in the same generation? In the end, each individual is but a public machine, forever ready to serve the public as it sees fit, meaning he has become subordinate to two types of public. A, from the perspective of the first factor, he has become subordinate to a large public from past generations, standing one after the other. And B, the perspective of the three other factors, he has become subordinate to his contemporary public. This is indeed a universal question. For this reason, many oppose the above natural method, although they thoroughly know its validity. Instead, they choose metaphysical methods or dualism or transcendentalism to depict for themselves some spiritual object and how it sits within the body, in man's soul. And it is that soul that learns and that operates the body. And it is man's essence, his self. And perhaps these interpretations could ease the mind, but the problem is that they have no scientific solution as to how a spiritual object can have any contact with physical atoms to bring them into any kind of motion. After all, their wisdom and delving it not help them find a bridge on which to cross that wide and deep crevice that spreads between the spiritual entity and the corporeal atom. Thus, science has gained nothing from all of these metaphysical methods. So here, once again, he's just bringing us back to the basics. He's saying, listen, if I am a summary, like the total, actually, a consequence of all the predecessors, my ancestors, plus due to the environment that I'm in, that I was raised in, I become a product with all the instincts and the ancestral heritage I have. I am a slave to the predecessors, and I am a slave to the current society. So what person, what man are we really talking about here? What individual are we talking about? What self are we talking about? So Baal Islam rightfully says, well, we don't have one. It's just made up of these two things, our predecessors and the current environment, and out we go as a product, as a part of this big machine called reality or creation or humanity, doesn't matter what we call it. And we're all in there as parts of that machine functioning. So where is the individual's self, the me, the what am I, the who am I part of creation? So we don't really have an answer to that question. So humanity, on the one hand, recognizes that this is the situation, but doesn't like the idea. So it comes up with alternatives like, hey, we've got a soul, we've got souls and so on. So it comes up with an alternative. It's human nature. Whenever we don't like something, we like to believe in something else, or we have an excuse for everything, in other words. And this is human nature, so there's nothing we can really do about it. But from a scientific perspective, Baal Islam is a straightforward person. He's a Kabbalist. So he just cuts through cuts through the junk, straightforward, like a sharp knife, cuts through the cake and says, listen, what you guys are saying is wrong. And if we look at it objectively, we can understand that a person doesn't really have anything. There is no self he can attribute himself to, simply because it's an outcome in terms of his hereditary possessions from his ancestors and from his birth in whatever culture, parents, wherever he's born, until he grows up, he's a product of that environment. So he grows up in between these two conditions. So there's nothing really to attribute to a person. There is no person. It's like a machine being created. So he's just explaining this to us, and why these hereditary things, these traits in us, are very valuable. Because if you take a look at all the combinations of generations that we go through and all the ancestors that we've had for thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of years, if you think about it, how different, how individualistic, how unique everybody is, how much that uniqueness of every individual adds to the richness of reality. And if you take one attribute, if you uproot that one attribute from anybody, you deprive the whole of reality from that richness. So he's just explaining, in other words, how interconnected, intertwined the whole of creation is from beginning to end, not just in our current state, but from its beginning to until the end of the whole phases that we have to get through to come to the purpose of creation. So humanity has to obviously find a way to preserve every individual's uniqueness, and that person needs to then use all the individuality that he or she has in a correct way to contribute to society. And then that's called self-realization. Then we have something to talk about that specific individual and that specific person's self-individualism that he or she is now using in a positive way to contribute to the overall functionality of reality. So all of that, he's going to carry on explaining to us. Are there any questions? Francesco is saying, hi, Mutlu, can you please spend a few moments and tell me the meaning and example of a precept? Thank you. Well, a precept hasn't got anything to do with the topic, but I'll tell you anyway. A precept, in terms of the wisdom of Kabbalah, is a good deed or something called a mitzvah, right? A good deed, a precept. And it basically means when I transform my egoistic desire, self-reception, desire to receive from myself, into bestowal. So when I make a switch between my egoistic nature with a certain desire to a bestowing nature, to an altruistic one, that's called a precept, where I've changed my egoism to altruism. That's what it's called. Obviously, they're not talking about in the wisdom of Kabbalah of religious precepts, because Kabbalah has nothing to do with religion. In fact, religion has taken most stuff from the wisdom of Kabbalah. So a mitzvah or a precept or a good deed is when I change my desire to receive from its egoistic nature to an altruistic one. That's called a precept. And that's accordingly done when a person is in a spiritual perception. Why? Because spirituality is beyond our body. So the wisdom of Kabbalah is only talking about that relationship that a person has towards reality or towards that force in reality, or call it the creator, it doesn't matter. So until a person is clothed with this new attribute of bestowal and altruism, there is no way he can actually do a precept. So don't get it mixed up with religious deeds, as many people have done in the past, because it's not connected. So let's read a little bit more. The will to receive existence from absence is the next subheading. To move a step forward in a scientific manner, here all we need is the wisdom of Kabbalah. This is because all the teachings in the world are included in the wisdom of Kabbalah. Concerning spiritual lights and vessels, we learn that the primary innovation from the perspective of creation, which he has created, existence from absence, applies to one aspect only, defined as the will to receive. All other matters in the whole of creation are not innovations at all. They're not existence from absence, but existence from existence. This means that they extend directly from his essence, as the light extends from the sun. There too, there is nothing new, since what is found in the core of the sun extends outwardly. However, the will to receive is complete novelty, meaning prior to creation, such a thing did not exist in reality, since he has no aspect of desire to receive, as he precedes everything. So from whom will he receive? For this reason, this will to receive, which he extracted as existence from absence, is complete novelty. But all the rest is not considered an innovation that could be called creation. Hence, all the vessels and the bodies, both from spiritual worlds and from physical worlds, are deemed spiritual or corporeal substance, whose nature is the will to receive. Two forces in the will to receive: attracting force and rejecting force. You need to determine further that we distinguish two forces in that force called the will to receive. A, the attracting force, B, the rejecting force. The reason is that each body or vessel defined by the will to receive is indeed limited, meaning the quality it will receive and the quantity it will receive. Therefore, all the quantity and quality that are outside its boundaries appear to be against its nature. Hence, it rejects them. Thus, that will to receive, although is deemed an attracting force, is compelled to become a rejecting force as well. So, the will to receive needs to be, well, it's created basically in a way that it works in two ways. We also work in two ways. We're attracted to pleasure and we reject pain. So we're in between these two reigns. But what he's really talking about here is the will to receive was first created in order to receive. That's what it's called, the will to receive. It needs to receive, otherwise it can't really exist. It's required to receive, but it's required to receive in a certain specific way that it doesn't degrade himself. It doesn't degrade itself, rather, or it needs to be used in a way where the creature and the created being are actually in equilibrium, in balance, or in equivalence. And this is why the will to receive has two forces, the attracting force and the rejecting force. Both of these need to be in us, and this is why we always perceive reality from two opposite perspectives, day, night, sweet, bitter, and so on. So everything needs to be in two opposite forms in order for us to have a perception or a thorough understanding of everything. And that is what was created. So the Creator only created the desire to receive, and how we use it are in these two ways. But let's see how we're supposed to work with it. One law for all the worlds. Although the wisdom of Kabbalah mentions nothing of our corporeal world, there is still only one law for all the worlds. As written in the article, The Essence of the Wisdom of Kabbalah, section, The Law of Root and Branch. Thus all the corporeal entities in our world, that is everything within that space, be it still, vegetative, animate, a spiritual object or a corporeal object, if we want to distinguish the unique self aspect of each of them, how they differentiate from one another, even in the smallest of particles, it amounts to no more than a desire to receive. This is its entire particular form from the perspective of the generated creation, limiting it in quantity and quality. As a result, there's an attracting force and the rejecting force in it. Yet anything other that exists in it besides these two forces is deemed the bounty from his essence. The bounty is equal for all creatures, and it presents no innovation with respect to creation as it extends existence from existence. Also, it cannot be ascribed to any particular unit, but only to things that are common to all parts of creation, small or large. Each of them receives from that bounty according to its will to receive, and this limitation defines each individual and unit. Thus, I have evidently, from a purely scientific perspective, proven the self, ego, of every individual in a scientific, completely criticism-proof method, even according to the system of the fanatic, automatic materialists. From now on, we have no need for those lame methods dipped in metaphysics. And of course, it makes no difference whether this force, being the will to receive, is a result and a fruit of the material that had produced it through chemistry, or that the material is a result and a fruit of that force. This is because we know that the main thing is that only in this force imprinted in every being and atom of the will to receive, within its boundaries, is the unit where it is separated and distinguished from its environment. And this holds true both for a single atom or for a group of atoms called a body. All other discernments, which there is a surplus. Well, before we carry on reading, it's important to understand here this, and this is a big Kabbalist, Baal Islam, huge Kabbalist, and he's looking at it from such a pragmatic and a clear-cut way. So he says it doesn't matter if we're created out of chemistry, from nature, or whether we're created from this force, call it creator, God, nature. It doesn't matter what you call it. At the end of the day, we are what we are. So there's no difference between that single atom and a group of atoms that form any body. And so there's nothing really to talk about here. There's nothing really to mix with anything that's not clear, like metaphysics. So all these other methods are just made redundant simply because they're based on non-factual or non-scientific or non-proven or non-seen or non-understood things, or they're purely assumptions or theories or make-believe, even, if you think about it. So let's carry on reading a bit more. All other discernments in which there is a surplus of that force are not related in any way to that particular or that group of particles with respect to itself, but only with respect to the whole, which is the bounty extended to them from the Creator, which is common to all parts of creation together, without distinction of specific created bodies. So, in terms of reality, all of us are a part of the one whole thing. So nobody is really better or nobody is higher than the other. So we're all in this one basket. Everybody's equal and everybody's treated with respect to the purpose of creation or where we want to get to in an equal way. Although it doesn't look equal in our eyes, because sometimes you have the rich, the poor, the hungry, the well-off, and so forth. However, though, the way Baal Islam is explaining it to us, because there's a purpose to everything, and there's a purpose to creation, all the parts in that creation are being treated specifically, individually. That's why everybody has their individual traits. So everybody is being treated individually in the system and is being driven towards that purpose. So this is why we have the good, the bad, beautiful, ugly, and all kinds of things in reality. And we sometimes feel, things are really created in a horrible way. If you think about everything that we've went through in human history, it's just like awful things. But if you just take your head out for a little bit, look at it from the outside and consider where we're going, from the beginning to the end, consider looking at it from the end result rather than being consumed with what's happening in between. So get out of the details first. Look at the overall picture. Understand where creation is being driven to, and understand where it's going and why it's going in that direction. Then you have a much better chance of actually evaluating all the details that's happening in between to humanity or to yourself as well. So that way you're actually beginning now to relate everything to a specific goal. And that's bringing more understanding to the things you're going through as an individual and as a global society, as everything in reality. So that way, whether you're an individual or whether we're all of humanity, we're going through this process together towards the same goal. And because we're going towards the same goal together in our own individualistic way, we can say that the Creator or nature or life treats us equally. Okay, so that's an important thing we need to understand. Otherwise, you're never really able to reconcile all these bad things that happen in life, because we're not judging things towards the goal. We're just looking at it from our personal desire to receive. So whenever we feel bad or something bad happens and it's really has a negative impact on us or on humanity, we can't reconcile it. Why? Because we don't know what the goal is. We don't know why life is bringing us such torments and suffering. Even now with the COVID-19, all kinds of natural disasters all over the world right now, all these things are happening. Why? Because we can't relate it to a goal. So we're just going from one suffering to the other. It's this vicious cycle. So Bala Islam says, well, let's get out of it, let's snap out of it, and let's start looking at it from the whole perspective of creation from beginning to end, and then let's integrate our individuality accordingly and correctly into that process. Then we can all move forward in life with a thorough understanding of what we're going through. And that is a path where you're not suffering because you have understanding of the process you're going through. All right, so let's carry on reading a bit more. Now we shall understand the matter of the freedom of the individual according to the definition of the first factor, which we call the source, where all previous generations, which are the ancestors of that individual, have imprinted their nature. As we have clarified, the meaning of the word individual is but the boundaries of the will to receive imprinted in its group of molecules. So first of all, he's taking us back a little bit, saying, well, the source is that drop-off sperm or that gene inside the mother's womb. So the egg and the sperm come together. That gene holds on to the womb of the mother. And in that gene, everything that we hold, all the hereditary possessions from our ancestral heritage of thousands of years, is in that single cell, and that's growing in the mother's womb. Thus you see that all the tendencies he has inherited from his ancestors are indeed no more than boundaries of his will to receive, either related to the attracting force in him or the rejecting force in him, which appear before us as tendencies for stinginess or generosity, a tendency to mingle or to stay secluded, and so on. Because of that, they really are his self, fighting for its existence. Thus, if we eradicate even a single tendency from that individual, we are considered to be cutting off an actual organ from his essence. And it is also considered a genuine loss for all creation, because there is no other like it, nor will there ever be like it in the whole world. After we have thoroughly clarified the just right of the individual according to the natural laws, let us turn and see just how practical it is, without compromising the theory of ethics and statesmanship, and most important, how this right is applied by our holy Torah. Torah obviously is talking about the wisdom of Kabbalah. Torah means light, actually. It's actually a user manual and light. It comes from two words, Torah and Torah. So Torah is the light of the light from a book, or the light from a user manual. So if we use the method of Kabbalah, the wisdom of Kabbalah correctly, we'll be able to understand correctly how everything is functioning in life, how we function and how life functions. Therefore, the interaction between the individual and life can be balanced out. This is why the laws of nature are all based on balance. And the only thing unbalanced is the human being. So humanity's actually job is to balance itself out with nature. And the moment we do that, we'll then begin to feel this elevated state of existence. Currently, because we are so soaked in the swamp of our egoism, we can't balance ourselves out. So we're always living in this desire to receive pleasure for ourselves, never being fulfilled. And our life is full of all kinds of problems, individually and societally. Right now, look at the US with all the riots, the whole global epidemic of COVID-19, plus all the mutations, all the derivatives of that virus also all over the place. Second of all, now, after all that, the riots, the viruses, we're having a bunch of natural disasters. We're having floods, earthquakes all over the world. If you look at, Disaster Watch, and you take a look at the list of disasters that happen all around the world, all the time. This is just, every day there's something happening somewhere, earthquakes, flood, fires, whatever. So all of this is just immense accumulation, a lot of pressure on human society that's about to blow up. So let's go to the next subtitle. Before we go to the next title, let's read another question from Francesco. If I'm understanding that if I have anger issues, they're ancestral and cannot be corrected, correct? That's right. Everything is all our traits, everything we consider as instincts. Everything is from our ancestral heritage. We actually don't have anything that belongs to us. So we're just an outcome of the environment's education or influence on us. And when I say on us, I'm talking about all the traits we inherited. So a person is actually the result of the traits of his ancestral heritage plus the upbringing, the education of the society, the culture one is in, and accordingly then you got your traits working inside of you. It's like on autopilot, really. So yeah, so how can you learn to use or choose not to use those traits which you consider to be bad? That also needs to be by the influence of the environment. So on the one hand, we have an egoistic nature, and our egoistic nature is forcing us to use all these ancestral traits in an egoistic way. So we use everything egoistically. Plus, the human society is giving us values and education, and we're using all of the education we receive from society, plus our egoistic nature and those traits in a really egoistic, selfish way, self-fulfilling way, without taking into consideration anyone on the planet. How can we change that? Well, the same way humanity molded us, through education. So now if we sat down like we're doing right now and we're learning about human nature and we're learning about the general laws of nature, and now because we're studying it, we're increasing our knowledge and consciousness, we're increasing wisdom. Okay? So accordingly, now by increasing this wisdom, we can begin to plan ahead of what I need to do in order not to use those negative traits. I have them. I don't want to kill them. I want to actually maintain them, and I want to learn how to use them correctly. So even anger, even, I don't know, any trait that we all have, it's just a matter of learning it, learning how to use it correctly. This is why Balsam says we shouldn't uproot anything. We shouldn't delete anything from ourselves. But what we need to do is to learn how to use our nature in such a way that we transform it from egoism to altruism. Because once we do that transformation, then all the individual identity of our, we have the traits, the character, the personality, everything that we have can now be used in a balanced way with the laws of nature. And that sensation, living in that balanced sensation, is called spirituality, is living at a higher conscious state. This is why he disregards metaphysics, simply because there's nothing to hold on to with metaphysics. And because humanity can't reconcile the fact that we're a product of the previous environments, which are the ancestral heritage we have, plus the current environment, we can't reconcile it. So we don't want to really believe what the Kabbalists are saying. So we come up with all kinds of things. This is why religions came up. And this is why everybody believes that we have a soul. Why? How do you know you have a soul? Because religion taught us. Well, how do they know? Well, they don't know. This is why all their preaching is about a life after death. What could possibly happen after you die? There you go. So let's move on to the next topic. Taking after the collective, that's the subheading we're going to go to. Our scriptures say, take after the collective. That means that wherever there is a dispute between the collective and the individual, we're obliged to rule according to the will of the collective. Thus, you see that the collective has a right to expropriate the freedom of the individual. But we are faced with a different question here, even more serious than the first. It seems as though this law regresses humanity instead of promoting it. This is because while most of humanity is undeveloped, and the developed ones are always a small minority, if you always determine according to the will of the collective, which are the undeveloped and the reckless ones, the views and desires of the wise and the developed in society, which are always the minority, will never be heard and will not be taken into consideration. Thus, you seal off humanity's fate to regression, for it will not be able to make even a single step forward. However, as is explained in the article The Peace, section Necessity to Practice Caution with the Laws of Nature, since we are ordered by Providence to lead a social life, we have become obligated to observe all the laws pertaining to the sustenance of society. And if we are somewhat negligent, nature will take its revenge on us, regardless of whether or not we understand the reason for the laws. And we can see that there is no other arrangement by which to live in society except following the law of taking after the collective, which sets every dispute and tribulation in society in order. Thus, this law is the only instrument that gives society sustainability. For this reason, it is considered one of the natural commandments of Providence, and we must accept it and guard it meticulously, regardless of our understanding. This is similar to all the other mitzvot in the Torah, or the other mitzvot means precepts. So, Francesco, you asked about the precepts a minute ago. So here, this is similar. This paragraph here says this is similar to all other mitzvot, all of the precepts in the Torah. All of them are nature's laws and his providence, which come to us from above downward. So, as you can see, a precept is the law of nature. They're the laws of nature, and that's how the Creator created everything. So actually, laws of nature are the rules that we need to go by. This is why we need to balance ourselves to the laws of nature. And because laws of nature are always acting in terms of balance, in terms of altruism, it only takes what it needs and it gives the rest back to nature, like in animals or in plants. They always take what they need, but not more than what they need. But humans, because we're so greedy, want to take everything from everyone, despite the fact that we have everything. So this is why we are opposite to nature. So he's saying here that we have to be in accordance with the laws of nature. And these are the precepts that they're talking about. This is what humanity has to do, live according to the laws of nature. And I've already described the essence of the wisdom of Kabbalah, the law, or the law of root and branch, how all the stubbornness we detect in the conduct of nature in this world is only because they're extended and taken from laws and conducts of upper spiritual worlds. Now you can understand that the precepts in the Torah are no more than laws and conducts set in higher worlds, which are the roots of all of nature's conducts in this world of ours. The laws of the Torah always match the laws of nature in this world as two drops in a pond. Thus we have proven that the law taking after the collective is the law of providence and nature. So this is also something we really need to understand, because when we're talking about Torah in terms of the wisdom of Kabbalah, we're definitely not talking about it like the religious people do he's really nicely summarized it here. The laws of the laws of the Torah always match the laws of nature in this world as two drops in a pond. So he's saying Torah is the laws of nature, basically. And this is what the wisdom of Kabbalah is talking about. This is why nature and the laws of nature, how we're created, how our nature works, these are the fundamental things we need to understand so we can balance ourselves to creation and come thus henceforth to that higher level of consciousness. A path of Torah and a path of pain. Yet our question about the regression which had emerged from this law is as yet not settled by these words. Indeed, this is our concern, to find ways to mend that. But providence for itself does not lose because of that, for it has enveloped humankind in two ways, the path of Torah and the path of pain, in a way that guarantees humanity's continuous development and progress towards the goal without any reservations. Indeed, obeying this law is a natural, necessary commitment. So there you go. Now that we discovered that we need to keep laws of nature, and so there are two ways we can live. We either keep the laws of nature or we don't. If we keep it, it's called the path of Torah. We can develop in a nice way. That's what it's saying. Torah being light. We can develop in an enlightened way. And if we don't balance ourselves to the laws of nature, well, then that's the path of pain, which is where humanity is going, as you can see right now. So because humanity is progressing in that way, we're getting a lot of blows from nature. Right? This is why we have a virus. It's from nature. This is why we have all kinds of natural disasters. It's from nature. So it's man against nature. Why? Because our natures are opposite and they're fighting. So humanity needs to match itself to the laws of nature so that this will stop. There's no other way for humanity to live and to move forward in life. There's just no other way. So the sooner they get the message, well, humanity gets the message, the better. And we'll see how that moves on, how that goes forward. Right now, doesn't look like it's going anywhere. So hopefully, without more suffering, we'll try to raise ourselves to a higher level of consciousness. Obviously, all of the students of B'nai Baruch, we're endeavoring really to raise ourselves to that next level of spirituality so that we can actually pull humanity to that higher level of consciousness as well. Because in humanity, if you also have this group of people who push forward for spiritual development, it influences everybody because the whole world is an fully integrated system. So all of us are really integrated to each other. And because of that integration that we have with each other, when any human being is actually increasing its consciousness and elevating itself spiritually, it's actually impacting all the other parts of humanity as well. So the more we study, the more we try to elevate ourselves and change our egoistic nature to a compatible one with the laws of nature being more altruistic, then we actually have the opportunity and the ability to pull the whole of humanity to a higher level of consciousness. That automatically will bring a qualitative change in human society. Right, then Francesco is asking, if in the US they fracture the soil for gas, root, the earthquake is the branch. Well, I wouldn't really say that. It's got nothing to do with it, actually. What has got to do with it is all the natural disasters in the world. It's a bit hard to grasp, but it is because of bad human interaction. So all the viruses, all the negative impacts, everything negative we go through in life is actually because of bad human relations. We treat each other as humans badly. We're egoistic. We only love ourselves, so we only take into consideration ourselves. And because of that, we suffer. And all the natural disasters is simply because humanity doesn't know how to treat each other. Now, that seems like a far-fetched phenomenon, but it isn't really. It's not far-fetched at all. And I'll tell you why it's not far-fetched. Think about it for a moment. Our nature works egoistically. So if we have a group of people, like 8 billion of us, who are constantly working in an egoistic way, who always want to draw things to themselves, it's always me kind of attitude, then what am I doing really? I'm trying to eat everybody up, aren't I? So the more I'm trying to eat everybody up, what am I doing? I'm completely destroying nature. Why are we cutting down all the forests? Half the, fishing, I think more than half the fishing fishing grounds are pretty much now without any fish. So we're destroying nature, we're destroying the animal level, we're destroying the still level as well. With, like you said, we're drilling all over, but we're drilling in such a way that there's no end to it. If we were only drilling for oil or for natural gas for the necessities that we need in life, we wouldn't have natural disasters. The problem is humanity always wants to be better than everybody else. I want to be better than everybody else. I want to be richer. I want to be more powerful. I want to know more, control more, be more than others. This attitude that is embedded in our nature, which is called egoism, that's the destroying force. So the actions of humanity is based on our egoistic nature. This is why the world is going from bad to worse all the time, because our egoism is always growing. And now we've come to a point in life where egoism doesn't really have any other place to go. And because we're so unbalanced with nature, now nature is hitting back with all these viruses and natural disasters and so on. So we're going to get crushed from both sides. On the one hand, humans against humans with their egoistic nature. And on the other hand, nature is going to be banging us because we're against nature. So from both sides, so from the social aspect, where we have conflicts within society or within countries or within people, then we've got also now war against nature. We're just going to get crushed in between these two forces until we understand what's going on. So if you think about it, all the bad things that happen in life is because humans don't treat each other correctly. Because if we knew how to treat each other correctly like animals do, they only take what's a necessity. They don't take more than what they need. They're not greedy. They take what they need and don't touch anything else. If humanity was living in that way, we'd never have a problem called natural disasters. We wouldn't even have any viruses. Why? Simply because we'd be in balance. We wouldn't be harmed by anything. The only reason we're getting harmed is simply because our egoistic nature is destroying, it's unbalancing everything. So nature has to push to balance it back. How's it going to do that? It's going to do it with such things as viruses, floods, earthquakes, fires, and so on. What has the virus done for us? It shut us all up. So it told us, stop consuming. Stop consuming junk. Stay at home, eat what you need, and that's it. Don't go out. Why? Because the relationships you have between each other are destroying the whole planet. So nature is now hitting back. So it's a really good example, actually, about how humanity can never, ever balance itself out unless it re-educates itself and works on changing the way it behaves. And that's called education, and that's called the wisdom of Kabbalah. Francesco's asking again, but doesn't God want to please us by giving us the best things in life so that we're happy? Shouldn't we make an effort to become better and better? Yes, but better and better at what? Becoming better and better in technology is not going to make us happy. We've been doing that for years and we're not more happy. We're not happier. The Creator wants to make us happy, but He wants us to understand that being happy is to live in an elevated state of perception, not in this corporeal junk world that we're constantly surrounded by a plastic artificial life where we've destroyed half the planet. So being happy and what the Creator wants to give us as happiness is to exist like Him in reality. That's called happiness. So this is why humanity's destiny is to come to perfection so we can be happy, which means to exist in reality like He exists. It's a nice question. Cointe is asking, what changes can we begin to see if we were to do that and begin good human relations? Well, for one thing, we'd stop causing harm to each other. Okay. So for one thing, I wouldn't be running after things that were not necessities for me. Now, living according to necessity doesn't mean we have to really have a bad life. It doesn't mean we have to have anything bad. It doesn't mean we have to have less of anything. It just means we should have enough of everything to be fulfilled and to live a normal life, but not more. Because more doesn't bring us happiness anyway. According to the laws of nature, whenever I get what I want, the desire and the pleasure, they cancel each other out. So in corporeality, we can never be happy anyway. So the Kabbalists are saying, well, listen, even if you run after anything in life and get it, you're still not going to be happy. It's impossible. It's against the laws of existence. So if I want to get rich, and I did get rich, wanting to get rich and the richness, they cancel each other out. Now it doesn't feel like I've got pleasure anymore. Why? Why do you think rich people end up more in depression, drug and alcohol abuse? Because if you have everything, you don't have a taste from anything. And because you don't have a taste from anything, you go nuts. You begin to think for yourself, how come I have all the money I need and more, and I'm still not happy? Well, you're not happy because you can't be happy according to that. So humanity needs to understand what it means to be happy. And if we all understood that, then we wouldn't be running after unnecessary things. We'd be running after what really makes us happy, which is a good connection between humans. This is why we get most pleasure in life when we're with our loved ones, when we're with family, with people we love, with our friends. And when we interact with them, we have a lot of fun, pleasure, and we enjoy it because we have good connections with them. Now imagine having good connections with your whole environment. You wouldn't have to worry about anything. You trust everyone around you. Everybody understands human nature. They all understand how we need to live and we need to work in that way. And we understand each other. And that's it. So it's possible to do in two ways, like he says in this article, either through suffering, where nature is going to push us into so much suffering that we will by force have to change, or by voluntarily understanding and studying and learning how we need to change, we can change voluntarily, consciously, in a much in a sophisticated way, in a civilized way. So the immediate changes we'll begin to see, first of all, is that we'll get less depressed. We'll feel more secure with people around us. We'll feel the security. We won't constantly be afraid if we're going to get robbed or killed or whatever. So the whole of humanity will first of all calm down. And that will already give us a stress-free life for a start. And then afterwards, just have to keep working on learning and educating ourselves to live in that specific way. And once we progress, the whole of humanity can actually rise to that level really quickly because of the masses. So if a mass of people started elevating themselves, living in that way, it would quickly pull the whole of humanity after them as well. So those are nice questions. And also by studying how we're supposed to build these good relations between us, we can actually begin to understand why things happen to us. And that is already a conscious way of developing ourselves. So all these things are really interrelated. Learning about our nature, learning about the general laws of nature, learning about how everything is integral and integrated really helps us to really understand why we go through the things we go through. And this understanding already is a great plus because it eliminates all the blurriness. It eliminates all the stress, the depression, and the lack of confidence, and all the psychological issues, problems we have, because we begin to now relate everything towards that purpose in life. And that is what we need to do so we can have an understanding about our development towards that purpose. Rightio, so we've come to 10 o'clock and we are at the subtitle, The Collective's Right to Expropriate the Freedom of the Individual. Okay, so please make a note of that. And hopefully next week, we still have a bit of this article left, so hopefully we'll finish this off. In the meantime, take care, all the best. See you guys next Tuesday. Have a good evening.